Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Good morning, NFC East. Feels good to be back, Tone. After a day of rest and relaxation and just trying to get this laryngitis out of my system. It's going away slowly, Tone to Shields, but this is the best my voice has felt in at least 5 days.
Yeah, man, it's that season, right? You know, there's so many things going around. You know, I was just sick in December, the week prior to Christmas, and I was hoping I'd be ready for the holidays, but you know, luckily, you know, I was able to bring myself up to it. So yeah, man, so it's all about knowing your body, man, and just knowing, you know, what you can, you know what you're willing to handle, and you know, again, things are going around at this time of year, so it's important to take care of yourself.
Yeah. So one of the things I did yesterday, I'm normally a guy who I'm active, right? So I just thought shut it down, no running, no trying to break a sweat, do anything like that. I watch a lot of film anyway. I watched a ton of film yesterday. And we were talking about this backstage. One of the things I've noticed when it comes to I'm trying to think of the best word for it, the reviled Jonathan Gannon, because it seems like everybody likes to blame him for the Eagles' problems, just like everybody likes to blame Doc Rivers for the Sixers' problems, because let's be honest, people don't know what they're talking about. So
I'll admit I get emotional and blame Doc Rivers for their problems.
Do you blame Doc Rivers for James Harden missing 2 free throws though?
Oh no, of course not those kind of things, but you know.
So anyway, so watching their coverage on first, second, and third down, right, in the first half of the Saints game, and I'm thinking to myself, and I've noticed a trending pattern here. The Eagles usually switch to man on third down, and I'm going, why are they doing that, and why are they playing so far back?
I'm with you. It's like you're playing man, but you're so far away from the opponent, the man is kind of obsolete. I get what you mean. And I think this is the mentality that Jonathan Gannon has instilled in these guys, right? Not being so close to the line of scrimmage. But then you mentioned also second half, they started playing, you know, a little bit tighter, a little closer to the line of scrimmage, being more physical with the receivers. And things change. This team is more physical than what people realize. This team is much more talented in man than Jonathan Gannon gives them credit for. And you know, I was talking about this previously, and this team has to utilize the talent they have while they have the opportunity. This is a golden opportunity for the Philadelphia Eagles. Yes, they're dealing with injuries, but they have a chance, as good as anyone else, to win the Super Bowl. And the last thing you want is to leave anything out on the field. You want to be as aggressive as possible that makes sense. You don't want to be passive in a situation where, you know, it calls for you to, you know, kind of dictate the pace, you know, dictate the energy or the momentum of a game. I just feel like sometimes with the Gannon's defense, it's too reactive instead of, you know, being proactive.
Doesn't it feel like, too, this team is really good at adjusting at halftime? It feels like the best way to get to this Eagles team is early on in the game when you got the scripted plays. Obviously, we always hear about the 15 scripted plays, but a lot of the scripted plays do come in the first quarter, early in the second quarter. It feels like that's like the best way to get this team, because whatever Nick Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon do in that 12-minute halftime, it seems to work most of the time.
But why is their script more effective than your script? You get what I mean? Like that's an issue for me.
It's an issue for me too, because I did not like, and again, this is just rewatching the game. Pass, 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 pass. Why did this team take so long? And I get Miles Sanders was wearing a knee brace. I get his knees bothering him, but it wasn't that big of a concern.
To him, at least.
Yeah, thank you. It wasn't that big of a concern to him and to them, because Trey Sermon was not active.
I think they give way too much credit to Kenny Gainwell. They hold him in this regard that hasn't really panned out to me. And I like Kenny Gainwell. I think he's a talented guy, and I think he could be a contributor on a championship team, if used properly. And I just feel that this organization, this coaching staff more so, they put Kenny Gainwell on this pedestal as if he can do no wrong. And I'm trying to figure out, you have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and you got Trey Sermon, a young guy, not an old guy, a young guy who is still trying to prove himself in the NFL. Why not mix and match him with a Miles Sanders, or mix and match him with Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell, or even throw Buck out in the mix? Like, Trey Sermon is a very physical running back, and he's a great change of pace back, if you ask me. I'm not understanding what their logic is. I think this coaching staff is more finesse than physicality. That's just the bottom line.
I would agree with that, because it doesn't seem like, even though the Eagles can be physical, at least on the offensive line, that's how Jeff Stoutland likes to present themselves. You are right, though, with the finesse part. And it's weird, right? Because you got A.J. Brown, who I think is a very physical wide receiver, as you saw in that touchdown on Sunday. You got Devonta Smith, who does show his physicality when he's at the line. Dallas Goedert. But with the running backs, it's different. And I don't get it. Like, Miles Sanders could be a straight runner that can get a 60, 70-yard run at any time. And I think that's what they like about Kenny Gainwell, is the knack for the explosive play, even though we haven't seen it that much this year. And it's weird how Kyle Shanahan didn't believe in Trey Sermon. So now it feels like there's this aura around him.
Well, think about the way Kyle Shanahan uses his running backs. He likes to use his running backs in the passing game, and he likes to get creative with things like that. And his running backs are more finesse than power. You think about the guys he's had. He has Christian McCaffrey right now. I believe they had Raheem Mostert at one point. And then they also had Tevin Coleman. Their running back room has always been, speed, scat backs that can catch the ball from the backfield, elusive guys. Trey Sermon is more so that north-south, power back, that one cut, get physical, put your face in the dirt type of running back. And I guess he just wasn't a fit over there. But with this offensive line, see, I think the Eagles want to portray like they're really physical, but they don't dictate the physicality most of the time.
They let other teams do it, and then it feels like they know when to get physical. It's just they don't do it all the time, and I think that's the issue.
Yes, exactly. And in this playoff, you want to beat teams up. You want to beat them into submission. You want to make them remember that game that they played against you. And there's so many injuries going on, and it's beginning to limit the way they call plays. And my mindset is, this team is deep. This coaching staff needs to step their weight up in terms of their creativity, and needs to step their weight up in terms of how they deploy these guys.
Don't you think, though, they're trying to hide some things for the postseason because they know that they're in? And I know the Dallas game, you don't want to give anything away because there's a really good chance you're going to play them again. But the Saints game, do you feel like they needed to open up the bag of tricks? Or maybe the guy that they used for the bag of tricks just wasn't available?
I don't know, man. There's been a certain air of arrogance these past few weeks.
Yep.
with the way they've approached play calling. They aren't creative enough to keep Jalen out of harm's way. Like that Bears game just sticks out to me so badly. I don't understand how Miles Sanders only has like 12 touches, 10 touches on the game, if I'm not mistaken. And then early in that game, I think he only touched the ball like 1 time or 2 times in the first half, kind of similar to the Saints game.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I haven't criticized this coaching staff much this year because I haven't needed to. But the last couple,
I kind of just started to. Like these past few weeks, I've been starting to.
yeah, and I don't think it's a narrative that's being pushed. I think it's a legit concern, honestly. And do I think Jalen Hurts hides a lot of their stuff? No, I don't, because it doesn't work like that. I just think you're right. You're seeing the arrogance, though, even in the press conferences. Like, we can win with Gardner Minshew. Well, no, you can't. You can't win with Gardner Minshew.
He's shown that you can't. So
that's the Chip Kelly arrogance, right? Oh, I can win with anybody. No, that's not it. I'm sorry you didn't draft Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni. I'm sorry that he may not be who I don't want to say that's not who Nick Sirianni wants. I think they obviously want Jalen Hurts, but I'm sorry you didn't draft him, or he's not the guy, or you know what I mean? Sometimes it feels like, oh, this guy is good, and we didn't think he was going to be this 2 years in.
I don't think anybody did.
No.
And Nick Sirianni, you never know, man. He has this love affair with Phillip Rivers and Andrew Luck. Excuse me. That's clearly his kind of quarterback. Shane Steichen is the one that was able to craft up this offense with Jalen Hurts being mobile and, getting creative with the RPO, things like that. That's kind of how that turned out. Remember, Nick Sirianni was calling plays early on, and he had Jalen dropping back like 30 to 40 times. And then Shane Steichen came into play. He dialed that back, started running the ball more. So it begs the question. We know Shane Steichen historically is not afraid to run the ball. But at the same time, you're starting to see this pass-happy mentality creep its way back in. Is Nick Sirianni starting to become more hands-on as the season progresses in the play calling?
That's what I'm wondering too. Or if they've tried some things with Nick Sirianni being more hands-on because they only need to win 1 of 3 games. Do we go back to seeing Shane Steichen again on Sunday because Jalen Hurts is back as the quarterback? By the way, I totally expect Jalen Hurts to play this week.
Absolutely. And he participated in Wednesday's walkthrough. He was listed as limited on the injury report. And like you, I agree. He has to play, if you ask me. And also, a better part of my mind makes me believe that this injury isn't as bad as we may think it is. I just believe, and we know, right? The Philadelphia Eagles have been historically very cautious, at least in the Nick Sirianni era, right? They've been historically very cautious with not just injuries, but they've been really cautious with their players' health and how they deploy them and how much action they get, even in the offseason and so on and so forth. So I think Jalen could have played last week against the Saints. I also think Nick Sirianni got a little arrogant and said, yeah, I could win with Gardner Minshew, but tried to send out the same offensive game plan he would with Jalen Hurts with Gardner Minshew.
Does it feel
like sense?
Does it feel like Infinity War where we have blood to spare? So they used it the last 2 games, and now it's, okay, we're going to bring in our big dogs, and we're going to take this thing seriously because you kind of have to?
Yeah, you have to take it seriously. This, I don't want to say I've hit the panic button, but I've gotten to a point where this isn't about talent anymore. This isn't about how many bullets the Philadelphia Eagles have in the gun. This isn't about that anymore. Historically, we've always questioned, damn, do they have enough to compete with these teams? Do they have enough to compete with those teams? I don't know if they're a little weak here. This team is deep, and this team can compete with the best of them. I firmly believe that from a talent perspective. The only things that give me cause to pause going into the playoffs, and I hate that it's this, is obviously health. But even beyond that, the team is deep enough. I have a genuine concern with this Eagles coaching staff and their inability to coach through adversity. I struggle to believe that they can push the right buttons at the right time. Similar to that 2017 Super Bowl team. That's what made that coaching staff so special. They knew how to maximize what they had at that given time. You saw what they did with Nick Foles. And on top of that, they just knew what buttons to press at a particular time. And they truly understood the moment. They understood momentum. Like, for example, really quickly, and I'll let you respond. Doug Peterson in that Super Bowl, there was no other way to call that game. I watched that game back so many times. He couldn't have called that game any better, but also if he made one decision differently, they lose that game. He played that game like he was never going to be there again, or he called that game like he was never going to be there again. And I just have a hard time believing this coaching staff can put their egos aside and just say, you know what, this is what we have to do, regardless of what we want to do. This is what we have to do, and it will lead to success.
So I don't know if you ever read Doug Pearson's book.
I haven't. I wanted to, but I haven't.
Yeah. So that's basically exactly what he did. He said, I don't know if I'm going to get here again. I don't know what the situation is. I'm going up against Bill Belichick. And a lot of people were conservative against him. He said, I'm going all out. We're going to do whatever we can to win this game. And if we get blown out, so be it. I'm doing it my way. And he did that in the NFC Championship game too. He just went balls to the wall. And it worked for him. And maybe New England should have caught that. But to add to your original point here, and I'm glad you brought up 2017. I remember everybody being worried after that 6-0 loss to the Cowboys. And I'm like, this game don't mean anything, right? Like, he played backups. And I don't know. I always felt confident that whole year, even going into the divisional round. I'm just like, okay, these guys will figure it out when they have to.
Right.
I think this team is good enough to do that too, but I just don't like the arrogance of it. I don't like we can win with any quarterback or we can win with anybody on the field. Well, no, you clearly can't, because I think the 2017 Eagles would have taken care of business and beaten the Cowboys, if you want to be quite honest with me. I don't know. I don't think they toy around. They wanted to get this. You could tell in that locker room last week, they wanted to win that game. They wanted to get this thing done and over with and kind of rest up in week 18. They don't have the luxury of doing that anymore. I still think they're going to wrap everything up and everything's going to be okay, which is kind of what I wanted to ask you, though, Tone. I know that a lot of the fans have, I don't want to say a lot. I would say maybe it's 50-50 split. They've been panicking. Are you fearing anything? Are you panicking? Or is it just like, just take care of business against a team that really has nothing to play for this week?
I fear us. I fear the coaching staff's arrogance, like we've been talking about. But also, just referencing that 2017 team again and comparing it to now, the Eagles have entered the playoffs with a lack of momentum before. In that Super Bowl year, they didn't enter with the most momentum, or they didn't enter as the hottest team. They were considered to be the underdog. And we have our guy Kevin Bullard behind the scenes. We're going to bring him up very soon. I just want to get this point off. We'll go to break, Jeff. Ultimately, the Eagles have entered the playoffs without momentum before. So I'm not necessarily concerned about the losing streak, because I think the losing streak can potentially be a blessing in disguise. Just as overconfidence is deadly, it can be as deadly as having no confidence. So I'm glad this team kind of had that moment of clarity, like, oh, anybody can get touched in this NFL. Sometimes when you're winning so much, it's easy to get lost in the clouds and forget the details and, not pay attention to your keys. Losing forces you to revisit your flaws. And as a team and as a coaching staff, they've had to revisit some flaws these past few weeks. So I'm curious to see how it pans out. I'm curious to see how they handle this Giants game with Jalen Hurts coming back. I think we, like you and I said, we agree that he's going to be back. He has to play in this game. There's no way I'm giving Gardner Minshew another opportunity to blow this thing. And that's just how my mind works. So you guys continue to smash that like button, continue to stay engaged. We have our resident Giants fan, Kevin Bullard, coming on the screen in a few minutes. This has been Good Morning NFC East with Jeff Kerr. I'm your guy, Tone DeShields II. Keep it locked, you guys. You don't want to miss this.
Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
Number 1, Jeff D'Ambrosio. Destination Downingtown is rolling back prices for a December to remember. For a limited time, you can own, not lease, brand new 2023 Jeep Wranglers for only $30,995 or $339 per month. New Rams starting at only $30,995 or new Ram 1500 Bighorn Crew Cabs $189 per month. Zero down can deliver. Get the price you want, the selection you need, and the VIP treatment you deserve. Jeff D'Ambrosio, Destination Downingtown, Big Finish Sales Event.
We all know that taxes are just part of life. It's true during our working years, but also in retirement. But what you might not know is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits might be taxed. Our team at Thrive Financial has helped retire thousands of people across the Delaware Valley by asking questions they never knew they needed to ask, including how their Social Security benefits might be taxed. It's time to be proactive on taxes. Get your Thrive Retirement Tax Playbook today.
Game Show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post Game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.
I know it's Thursday, but we didn't have a show Wednesday, and it's Giants week, so Kevin Boylard had to join Good Morning NFC East for us this week. Kevin, how you feeling the Giants are in?
Jeff, I'm on cloud nine, man. Still have been. You know, all year, they've been saying the Giants can't win a game by more than one score. They kicked the tar out of the Colts. Finally got that big win under their belt. I'm feeling good going into the playoffs. Like, Giants fans gotta like the way the team has looked. Even going back 2 weeks, taking the Vikings to the wire on Christmas Eve, you know, making them kick a 61-yard field goal to win the game on the road in a whiteout. I don't know, man. I'm feeling a lot different going into this Eagles game than I was going into the Week 14 matchup.
I have to ask you, though, because the Giants have nothing to play for. They're going to be the 6th seed. Do you rest your starters?
No, and the biggest reason why I wouldn't rest the starters is because tell me who among the starters doesn't need any more practice. Like, the Giants are not world beaters. They're Colts beaters, but they're certainly not going to look like that against the playoff field. The Colts are nowhere near the playoffs right now. So I look at it like, which receivers don't need more work? They all need more work. Okay, well, they need work with the starting quarterback. Well, if the starting quarterback's playing, he needs the first team offensive line in the game protecting him. And for the entire offense to work in that function, Saquon's got to be in. So who's getting a rest on offense? There might be individual guys on defense who are a little banged up. Azeez Ojulari, Leonard Williams. I would maybe give them a rest if they want it. But I would be encouraging the players to play and say, hey, you want some rest? Go make this a blowout, and hopefully in the Giants' favor.
It looks like they're going to play the Vikings, though. Doesn't it feel like, is that like the matchup you want?
Is it definitely Vikings? Isn't it? It could be 49ers, right? It's going to be one of those two teams, though.
It could be 49ers, but right now the 49ers are the 2 and the Vikings are the 3.
Yes, that could change. There's no way, from what I understand, it could be like the Eagles can't fall to 3. And I don't know if the Cowboys can be 3 at the end of the day. Can they? Do you know off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I don't think the Cowboys can be 3. I think it's either 1 or 2 at this point.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a way that they could play the Eagles in back-to-back weeks. I could be wrong about that. I haven't factored in all the ties that could potentially happen. But if we're just looking at those two opponents, looking ahead, it being either the Vikings or the 49ers, I'd much rather go on the road and play the Vikings than the 49ers, especially after the Giants just did that and performed pretty well in that game. The 49ers, I think, are probably right now the best, hottest team in the NFC. That's only within the last few weeks when the Eagles have, kind of faltered a little with Gardner Minshew in there at quarterback. But I think that the Giants could beat the Vikings. I'm not as confident in their ability to go on the road and beat the 49ers.
It's weird watching the 49ers this week. Again, I watched a lot of film yesterday since I didn't have a show, and just watching that game against the Raiders, I said, the 49ers are really good, but how does this defense let 34 points to Jarrett Stidham?
Yeah, that was a little bit of a head scratcher. I will admit, and maybe that one's just like, Bay Area rivalry. Some of that goes out the window a little bit, maybe, but I've also thought that, like, as good as Brock Purdy has played, someone's gotta expose him at some point, and like maybe it'll be a team like the Giants in the first round of the playoffs, or another team in the second round or something like that. But I really don't think that Brock Purdy is just going to cruise his way to the Super Bowl. He's going to he might win, you know what I mean? But there's going to be a game where he faces an elite defense where, they've been game planning for ways to mess him up, and it'll happen. I'm sure of it. It happens to every quarterback, particularly rookies. So I don't think that it's going to be like a cakewalk for Brock Purdy to walk through the NFC playoffs by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm just wondering who that team is that's going to get their first crack at him, that really, really, turns it into a defensive game. Maybe you can turn over Purdy a couple of times and give yourself a chance to win against a really formidable defense.
Doesn't it feel like, to me, there's 3 teams, and it's funny because one of them's the Eagles, the other one's the Giants, and the other 3, and the other one is the Cowboys. Teams that actually have legitimate pass rushes that can get to the quarterback. I thought the 49ers would face that with Washington, and it didn't happen. And give credit to the 49ers offensive line for doing this, but facing teams like that that can consistently get to the quarterback like they can, I feel like that's going to be his weakness come playoff time.
It could be. And a lot of times that looks different. Like you said, like, a defense will look a little different or play a little different in the playoffs. And maybe that's all it takes to, get the right pressure, force a turnover in the playoffs. All that stuff kind of comes to light. And teams we've seen teams that didn't really look like world beaters, their defense comes to life in the playoffs, and then all of a sudden they're in the NFC or AFC championship game. So it could happen. And the 49ers are a team that right now they look like they've won 9 straight. It's like, who can beat them? Even with their backup or third string quarterback, however we want to look at Purdy. They seem like a team that you can't find their weakness, but in the playoffs, someone will.
And this is why I think the NFC playoffs are so intriguing, because if the Eagles do take care of business Sunday, they're still going to be the 1. They might play Dallas in their first playoff game. Again, depending on how everything plays out. I still don't know what to make of Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay looks terrible, and then when it was time for them to show up, they did.
So you think, yeah, well, let me gauge your thoughts. So you think that the Eagles are going to take care of business this weekend against the Giants and wrap up that number 1 seed? Would that be your prediction?
That would be my prediction, just because QB1 will actually be playing. If Gardner Minshew was playing, I would not feel that confident.
Okay. And if there weren't anything on the line, would Jalen Hurts be playing in this game?
I would say no.
So then by definition, are the Eagles rushing Jalen Hurts back to win this game? Or is he ready to go?
I think they should have rushed him back last week. So yeah, that's just my opinion. I think people play hurt, and I don't think the injury is as bad as they're making it out to be either.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question too. Is I don't know really the severity of the injury. Is there going to be a situation too where he comes back and, hey, you got a couple weeks of rust to knock off? I'll just say, man, Eagles are coming off a couple of losses. Giants are coming off a big win, their biggest win of the season. The line right now is plus 14 for the Giants.
Why is it that high?
Because they just lost a few weeks ago by like 24. So, based on these two teams just played each other. But I feel like these two teams are in completely different places than they were even a month ago when they last met. So to me, I look at that and I go, I see that 14-point spread and I'm like, first of all, I know it's going to be closer than 14 points. Like, I'm not saying the Giants are going to win, but I got this sneaking suspicion that the Eagles already peaked. The Eagles peaked with that win over the Giants in week 14. It was a big win. Then you had the Chicago game where Jalen gets hurt. Then you got 2 straight losses. Now, what happens if you go into the playoffs with 3 straight losses? Now, what happens if you go into the playoffs with 3 straight losses and Dallas wins against Washington? All of a sudden, they're the 1 or the 2 seed. And the Eagles are suddenly, out of nowhere, the 5 seed, after looking like the best team in the league all year. All of a sudden, they're the 5 seed in the NFC, and all of a sudden, they got to go to Tampa Bay to play in the wild card round, which is a little reminiscent of last year, is it not?
It is in a sense, right? But I will say the Eagles are more equipped to handle a Tampa Bay. I'll say this: if the Eagles lose Sunday, there's no way they're going to the Super Bowl. I'm sorry. You're not winning 3 road playoff games and going to the Super Bowl. It's just not going to happen. I know Tampa Bay, in theory, did it a couple years ago, but Jalen Hurts ain't Tom Brady. Tom Brady is the GOAT playoff quarterback.
No, and I'm telling you, those 2 teams, if the Packers do win this week, and obviously the Bucks are already in, but they're in at best 9-8, and same with the Packers. I don't care. The Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady teams, I don't care about the record next to their names in this playoff field. They're going to be among the tougher teams to beat. You do not want to draw. Going from a couple weeks ago looking like, yeah, we're going to have a first round bye, most likely, to a couple weeks later to, oh, we actually might be going on the road to play Tom Brady in the wild card round. That is a incredible swing in terms of what could happen here in the next few days.
This is what, and again, I'm glad you brought the Packers too. I still am not sold on them yet.
No, me neither. I'm more saying, hey, we've seen Aaron Rodgers make it to the last 2 NFC championships, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he's still the reigning MVP 2 times over. So I know he doesn't have Devontae Adams anymore, but
Christian Watson's pretty good.
He is pretty good. And, dude, the way they looked, I'm telling you, there was a similar feeling. The way that the Giants stopped the Colts. And I think it's even bigger for the Packers because it was divisional and it was against a team that's, was really trying to get into the running for a top seed. What they did to the Vikings this past weekend was unbelievable. And the way Jair Alexander just clamped down, said he would and clamped down. They got guys who that can play on both sides of the ball. It hasn't really come together for them as a team in a lot of games this year. Hasn't been consistent. But they still got a lot of good guys on both sides of the ball.
So I always thought the Packers defense was underperforming all year until the last 4 weeks. And this is why I think they're winning. Everybody's saying Rodgers. I'm like, that defense has 12 takeaways in the last 4 games. I don't think they had 12 takeaways in the first 12 games. That's a huge momentum swing. And Sunday they had 4. I'm thinking to myself, okay, this defense is finally starting to show up. Meanwhile, you got Rodgers, who's, again, I think he spoke a week too soon. Oh, now what? Well, you got to go beat the Lions, dude. I hate to tell you that.
Lions are no joke.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is Seattle loses. You don't think Dan Campbell's going to get that team fired up to play? The Lions are going to know their fate.
Yeah. I've got my suspicions that that game is going to be winner in for both teams on Sunday night.
You think Seattle loses to the Rams?
It's hard to explain to you how that's going to happen right now. But I do think that that's what's going to, at the end of the day on Sunday, the NFL will have a playing-in game or winning-in game for both the Lions and the Packers on Sunday night. That's what I think.
It is crazy how we're talking about the NFC, and we haven't even gotten over to all the craziness that's in the AFC yet. And I need to get your thoughts on DeMar Hamlin. Like, were you watching the game live when it had? It's been 3 days, and I still can't believe what I watched.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Obviously, you just hope he's going to be all right. I'm sure you've talked about it a lot on the program this week. But, definitely concerning that we're here a few days later and we don't really have many updates. I know that there was one for the Bills yesterday. It says that he's trending in a positive direction, but it's like, that could mean a lot of different things at this point with the limited information that we have. So, I was watching it live. It was definitely pretty scary. And, I'm curious, like, where the mind frame is for those two teams, particularly the Bills, moving forward, because it doesn't look like they're going to make up that game. I don't know what the Bills game is going to be like this weekend. And then, how, with so much uncertainty around it, I don't know how you get your, mentals together to focus on the task at hand, with that just being kind of this situation that's lingering that no one really knows what's going to happen. So that's a tough situation, obviously, for the Bills, but beyond the Bills too. I mean, just NFL fans and anyone who saw that obviously was definitely really, moved by it.
I knew the NFL wasn't going to do it, but I thought they should have at least considered it. Just not playing this week and pushing everything back.
Yeah, logistically, that must be a nightmare. I've thought that. I was like, could they just push everything back a week or, rearrange? They're not going to rearrange the playoffs and stuff like that at this point. But, would it be the end of the world if they just pushed everything back a week? Now, I would imagine with travel accommodations and stuff like that, it must be like just a logistical nightmare that is beyond what can be done in such short notice. But again, I've never worked in that world. I don't understand that world. I do not know how to plan that kind of stuff. So I'm sure that there are people that are paid a lot more than me to figure that stuff out. So it'll be interesting though. Like if the Bills and the Bengals just play one less game, I guess things will go to like, just overall win percentage type thing, which is kind of a throwback to the old, like, pre-Super Bowl days when it was like, you played as many games as your schedule said, and sometimes games were canceled and sometimes there was a bunch of ties and you just were like, whoever had the best winning percentage at the end went to the playoffs or whatever. So it's a little bit of a throwback in that regard, but it's obviously unprecedented and strange.
Yeah. I never wanted to use the 9-11 comparison, but I remember obviously everything postponed. But that was week 2. That was so early in the year. I remember the Eagles were supposed to play the Bucs in week 2, and then 9/11 hit. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I remember everybody was panicking that Monday. Oh, we just lost to the Rams. It was a big game. It was a close game. They rallied back. Now we gotta go play the Bucs, who we just played in the playoffs last year. That's a brutal stretch open the year, and then boom, like everything just happened. And then we're like, okay, yeah, sports are such a who cares, right? And with everything going on, that's how I felt. That's how I felt the last couple of days with DeMar Hamlin. I'm like, dude, I don't even care right now. Like, I don't care who gets the number 1 seed in the AFC. I don't know how they're going to do this. And until today, I haven't really discussed like how you would think about doing this. And you're right, Kevin. I guess they're going to have to do win percentage. It'll probably be the Chiefs in that regard. But I said there's so much loose ends because the AFC North isn't wrapped up yet. How's that affect the Baltimore Ravens? How's that affect the Bengals? How's that affect the Bills?
Yeah, I'm sure, Jeff, this is not like the last we'll hear about it. Like you're gonna, depending on the way things shake out in the AFC, you're gonna hear about that missing game. Is my thoughts on that. Did
you see what Mike Florio said to my buddies over at 937 The Fan? I go on there with Mark Madden a lot, and we were I happened to listen in yesterday when Florio was on. I'm not a big Florio fan, but I happened to listen when he was on, and he was saying that he heard that the NFC playoffs might start next week, and they actually might do a week 19 to get that game in, and then just have the AFC playoffs a week later, and then everybody gets like a bye, and then they line things up again, have a conference championship week, and they don't have a Pro Bowl game, and then they kind of just play a Super Bowl the next week, so everything finishes out on time.
That's pretty interesting, and to be honest, I am sure the NFL is having those exact conversations. And then that's exactly how that type of stuff works. Like that I do know. Someone in the NFL has those conversations. What if we do this? Okay, well, let's float that out there to Mike Florio for him to pit, and then like see what the public reception is to that. And then, if it's like, hey, that's a good idea, that's what they're going to end up rolling with. That's how news works. But I am just thinking about that. I don't know exactly how that would work, but I'm thinking, would the NFC end up with an additional rest?
Yeah. So say the NFC starts their playoffs on time next week, right?
Yeah.
You play that round. Their divisional round is going on while the AFC wildcard round is, right?
Got it.
And the two divisional winners, they would get the week off while the AFC catches up in the divisional round.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so basically, whoever goes to the conference championship game in the NFC, they get the week off.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I guess that makes sense in the end, because it's like those two teams would have to play each other, and then you'd have the same amount of rest. Like it would be equal amount of rest between the two NFC teams playing each other, and then an equal amount of rest again on the NFC team that wins that versus the AFC team that wins the Super Bowl. You would just say, okay, if you were going to the Super Bowl, the AFC team could maybe say, well, they've only played one game in the past 3 weeks where we played two. So, I think that pretty much that's pretty fair,
Yeah. Here's the other thing too. Say like you get the number one seed in the NFC. You're getting a week off. You play. Say you win. Then you get another week off. Can you imagine how healthy that team would be?
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, all it takes is one injury to one player, which
quarterback
could really derail everything. So yeah, you'd have the rest for sure, but I don't know if it wouldn't guarantee that your team would be healthy. Rest and healthy, not always the same thing.
I said this too on Tuesday. I'm thinking in the back of my head, I would not want to be in that conference room or on a conference call where we're trying to think of a schedule, knowing everything that's going on. Like I couldn't process. I didn't even care about week 18. Like I had to write on one thing we learned in week 17, and I'm like, thank God I had half of it done. So I'm like, does it really matter at this point? Like I'm thinking about a guy who.
Yeah,
I covered in the Big 33 Classic 6 years ago, and I'm not sure if he's going to make it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. It really did put a lot of perspective on everything. When you talk about the logistical challenge, yeah, that's like 4D chess. I can't figure that stuff out in my head, and I don't know how people are doing it right now, but that's what they're paid to do. So, yeah, man, I really am curious. Like, I mean, I don't know if it helps or hurts the NFL that there's no game tonight, would that have helped like to kind of take some of the attention off of that situation? Or is it better that no one's playing because, it's still an uncertain situation. And so like, it's kind of distasteful or something, but there are a couple games Saturday, and I've got a feeling like the NFL probably can't wait to get to those.
I'm sure with everything going on, and I'm still kind of shocked the Bills are playing this week, to be honest.
So what was their situation? I thought like they gave them like the day off yesterday, media wise, at least.
Yeah. So I don't remember Sean McDermott talk. Zach Taylor talked a lot yesterday. And he was basically explaining the situation. Like Sean McDermott said, I got to be with this guy in the hospital.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm coming out here and Zach Taylor's like, yeah, go. Like, don't rely on us. Like, I don't get, like, Zach Taylor, he could care less. Like, it was like, okay, well, we're not going to play. There's no way we're playing this game.
Dude, a couple other things about that. Like, I thought that, like, there was a lot of people that were mad that, like, the NFL, I guess, waited as long to make the final decision.
What were you supposed to do?
Yeah, well, one, there's been a million variables. I also think that the knives come out whenever something emotional like that happens. Like, people just attack people and entities that they hate. And the NFL's the bad guy, let alone who was it? Probably an NFL employee who rushed out there and saved the dude's life. But regardless of that, it's like the confusion. My overall point was, wouldn't you want that decision made by those coaches, like by the people who are there on the field? Why would you want that decision made by someone in New York, hundreds of miles away, who's not there on the ground? Like, that decision should be made by the coaches and the players on the field in that moment. And so I think that the NFL had a lot of, there's a lot of stuff the NFL had to deal with before they can make their decision in terms of, like, again, we're talking logistics here, but how do you empty the stadium in an orderly fashion? How do you have to get a statement out from the commissioner, that takes time. And I think overall they weren't worried about being like, oh, let's do this as fast as we can. Their goal was, we want to make one statement tonight, not 2 or 3 or 4. So let's make sure our one statement is well-timed and right, so that the people who are waking up in the morning, no one's going to remember how long it took us to, make this statement. In the morning, people are going to wake up and see the news and the statement and all at the same time. And it's going to be, it's really just the Twitter people who were following along live, watching the game live, that were having such a, the reaction they were having to the NFL and saying, they're so horrible for not canceling the game. And, there was that confusion about the 5-minute warm-up type thing, which Troy Vincent has come out and said that didn't come from the league. And so I bet you there was a ton of confusion just going back and forth from, people who are there on the field, people at the league in New York, and the ESPN broadcast crew. So, it was a unprecedented situation. And I think sometimes you have to lend some people, some patience in that situation. Not everyone is like this whole, like, it being a referendum on, like, the NFL, whether they care about player safety and stuff like that, is just people trying to get their advance their motives and their agendas.
Well, that's what upset me, right? So everybody's blaming the NFL for whatever. And look, I'm not an advocate for what the NFL does, but I trust guys like Troy Vincent. I'm glad you pointed him out just from playing in Philadelphia. Troy Vincent's always been an honest man. And I'm saying, there is precedent to this. And they said, what are you talking about? I'm like, these same people complaining, they don't know a guy actually died on the field 52 years ago now, and they played. So I know it's a much different time, but
yeah,
the NFL could have actually said, play on. That would have went over terribly, but they did have a precedent for it.
Yeah, you're right. Chuck Hughes in 1971. And yeah, man, it was a pretty, I think that a lot of people show their true colors when, in both ways.
Yep.
Obviously, like, there was a lot of people who were sending off, one person in our industry in particular that took a lot of heat for sending off a tweet in the moment about, like what we're talking about today in terms of the NFL, logistics, stuff that was going to naturally come out in the conversation as days went on. Just, I think that, like, people on Twitter sometimes forget where they are and, like, get lost in the moment on both sides of that stuff. And
what did you think of that when he tweeted that?
I thought it was kind of like, when I read the tweet, I saw it come across, and I think it was his second tweet about the incident, first of all. So, he got his first thoughts out there, and then those were his secondary thoughts. It was obviously poorly timed. But I saw, like, Scott Van Pelt that same exact night was talking about the same thing. So it's really just the medium. Like, if you're just on Twitter, everyone can look at your statements in a vacuum, and people can look at your secondary tweet and not look at your first tweet. I didn't think it was the right time to be discussing that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like all of the people that look to just jump on him and destroy him for what he said and try to cancel him for that, like you're showing something else. You're showing like you have hatred for that man for some reason, and you're using someone else's tragedy to express your hatred because it's okay. Like, I don't know if you saw a lot of Des Bryant's comments about Skip.
I saw one or two.
Yeah, he was going scorched earth. And that to me shows that like Des Bryant has this pent up hatred for Skip Bayless for whatever reason. I understand he's maybe not the most likable guy. Probably said personal things about him in the past that were either not true or inaccurate. And there's a completely separate tragedy involving, you know, another man, his family, his teammates, all of that. And you're using that tragedy or the emotions attached to that tragedy to trash another man who is completely unrelated, who, yes, is grifting and using that to try to advance his, you know, narratives and his conversation starters and stuff. But to me, like all of that loses sight of, it's like what you said, man, like the one thing we learned about week 17, it's like, dude, how about the one thing we learned? Like there really was one thing we learned, you know what I mean? And that should have been the focus all along. And so the people that draw attention to his tweet, his insensitive tweet, are guess what? They're shining their light. You have a light and you can choose your however you want to use your light. And instead of shining it on something, you know, that probably deserved all the attention, I'm going to use my Twitter account as a lantern to shine it on this person that I can't stand so that everyone else hates him too. That's just a larger issue with social media for me. Like, I think that is toxic. And, you know, does he feed into it? Yes, he feeds into it. So he reaps what he sows, but ultimately people don't have to act that way.
Yeah, I just remember that whole night. Like, I didn't want to be on the Bird app. I can't stand the Bird app anyway, but I had to tweet just one thing, and I'm just like, I couldn't get over it. It made me sick. Like, I was sick to my stomach watching that. And that's all I tweeted. And then I was watching after the game. I couldn't believe how well of a job Ryan Clark did on there. And I said, you know, shout out to him, man, because that's not, he was basically talking about the same thing for 2 hours. And he found a way to bring out different viewpoints and everything that was going on. Like, you could tell, like, I learned a lot about Ryan Clark that night. And I always liked him, but I learned a lot of good things about Ryan Clark during that whole segment.
Exactly. I felt bad for, you know, that crew that was in the studio too. Like, obviously Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, and Joe Buck did most of the talking during that time. But when they would go back to the studio crew with Susie Colbert and Booger McFarlane and Adam Schefter, I was like, what more can these people possibly say? You know what I mean? Like, I understand everyone's tuned in and hooked and like looking for an update, and they need an update. You know what I want? You know what I mean? But like, yeah, man, I was like, they gotta cut away from this at some point, but they're not going to cut away until it's officially called by the NFL too. So I understood that catch-22, but yeah, I was like, man, at some point here, we got to stop listening to people just talk and just wait and just sit and wait for, now here we are, you know, 3 days later, and we still don't know a lot.
Yeah.
So
this is
a lot of waiting.
The last time I remember a situation like this, again, big racing guy, when Dale Earnhardt died.
Yeah.
We did not know. And Fox, they cut the broadcast. They just said, hey, look, we'll give you information when it's available. And the last scene they showed, and this is their first ever race they broadcast, was Dale Jr. running to the EMT. And I'm like, that ain't good. And then like 3 hours later, they announced his death. NASCAR had an announcement. I'm like, man, I'm still shocked to the core by this day. I've only gotten back to watch that race once in my life, and I have to stop. It's ridiculous, man. It's so tough.
They had the luxury of that being before social media, so they had, you know, not all the time in the world, but more time than we allow in today's society to, you know, disclose that news in a tasteful way and, you know, try not to trip over all the stuff that could go wrong in disclosing that kind of information nowadays. Like, I really think that the NFL is lucky in a lot of ways that it wasn't worse, because that the way that news would have come out would have been so not good for the NFL. It's obviously not a good situation now for the NFL still, but at least it's now a little bit more, the narrative and the news and the disclosure of information is a little more under control for them.
It's just a crazy situation. It's a no-win situation for him. But Kevin, I gotta let you go, man. I could talk about this stuff for another hour if I could.
Yeah, man.
You know, it's crazy, but I'm glad you were able to come on, share your thoughts on this. This was a good segment, man. But I gotta ask you before you go, who do you think wins Sunday, Eagles or Giants?
Giants, dude. Giants.
Of course. I knew you were gonna say that.
All the momentum, baby. They got it all.
Well, I'll tell you what. You and I will be texting a lot on Sunday.
I will. I'll text you.
All right, buddy. Thanks for coming on. I'll see you next Wednesday.
Catch you.
All right. And we got to wrap up the show quick. Once again, Kevin Boylard, always a pleasure to have him on. And Burst 365, Joe McDonald, John McMullen coming up next. They'll give you all the information you need on the Eagles practice yesterday. Jalen Hurts, limited participant in the walkthrough. Personally, I think he's going to play Sunday. Of course, I said that last week too, and it didn't, going into the Thursday show, it didn't mean too much. So, again, Burst 365 coming up next. This is Good Morning NFC East. My name is Jeff Kerr. Have a good day, guys.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.